Hello, my name is Renee L. Rose. I'm the founder of Explore Art Talk. With Explore Art, our featured guests, we have meaningful conversations celebrating artistic and cultural diversity that makes our world extraordinary. So sit back, relax, and check out our content. Thank you for joining us today.
You hear me?
Yes, you see me now?
I can see you now. Hi.
Hi, how you doing, Josh?
I'm doing okay, Renee. How are you?
I'm fine. Um, why don't we start off? Because I read all your background, obviously, is so extensive. I'm really curious let's start off this first. How was the dynamic summer with the Puppet Festival and Shake on the Lake? So, how do you think that went?
Well, I can answer that question in a number of ways. The first I would say is in terms of the programming, it was some of the best artistic work that I think we've ever produced and been able to share with our community, and that always feels really nice. Very high level, very professional, always introducing the audiences to something new and different, still familiar, but also, what's the next level of artistic um, not achievement necessarily, but uh, like goals and level setting that we can do for ourselves and professionalism. And that's always exciting to be able to bring to the table because it also keeps the artists excited. Um, Internally, I would say festival is starting to become a lot more like how we colloquially internally refer to it as, which is puppet summer camp. Um, so it's like really fun for the artists to come, be in this rural place that's really beautiful, be outside, engage in some of the activities that make it really fun in the summertime. Um, so that always feels really lovely. And for Shake on the Lake, this was our first summer in which we finally were able to bring the show back to the state in which a lot of the artists, including myself, started, which is Arkansas. I was a company member of the Arkansas Shakespeare Theater for many years. That's where I started to really cut my teeth as an actor in Shakespeare work. And also the Arkansas Arts Center and Children's Theater, which is now the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts. And to be able to bring our show that we've kind of worked on in this company that we've made over 13 years and bring that work to the community that kind of inspired it and started it was really full circle in such a beautiful way. So I feel very grateful in so many ways to be able to have had this summer. And internally, it ran well for us as a company. I think the Puppet Festival tends to be pretty stressful because of all the artists and moving pieces and different theaters and venues and audiences and getting people to go from show to show to show and making sure it's all running well. And this is the best it's ever run. There were certainly moments during it where some of my staff were like, I feel like I'm not doing anything. Is this okay? And I was like, it is okay because we're just waiting for like the one thing to end and the next thing to start. And to not be operating at that, vibratory stress level is, I think, great for everybody. So, I think as a company, we're maturing in a lot of great ways, and this summer was a reflection of that.
Okay, so now I want to roll you back to the beginning. When did you decide to become an advocate, which I am too,
Mm.
for rural art? And before you even get to that part, how did you get started in the puppet, being a puppet master and also in the theater? I think it's fascinating. I think it's
Yeah.
so awesome that you're bringing that back, that I'm glad you're doing this.
Well, I appreciate that, Renee. Thank you. In terms of getting started in puppetry, that was something that growing up, I didn't really know anything outside of the Muppets, which I loved. And, my mom, thankfully introduced me to and gave me a little Kermit doll when I was a baby, which I still have. And I just adore Jim Henson's work. And then when I went to grad school in 2012, I met Dan Hurlin, who was the head of the grad program at Sarah Lawrence College. And Dan is a very well-known puppet artist and taught this class. And I figured if I'm here with this incredible person, I might as well take their class. And for me, it was one of those things where once you're engaged in the activity and you're doing it and it's very physical and dynamic, and the physical nature of the work was something I just felt I knew in my body, that like intuitive knowing moment, that I
Mm.
was like, oh, this is for me. Like, I love this.
Mm.
And then that just extended to, puppetry is performance, but it's also directing and it's writing and it's design and it's building and carpentry and sculpture and costumes.
And
It's like such a
imagination.
100%. And
Yeah.
it's like a total theater making that I really loved. And to get in there with like drills and saws and like make little tiny puppet houses and furniture. Um, Loved it. And it made me feel like like I was stepping into a different kind of artist self, like I never felt like I was necessarily really an artist until I started doing this kind of work, because it requires so many more multi hyphenate skills.
Yes.
And prior to that, I was an artist, but I was an actor, and I guess there was like I don't know, there was something about acting that to me sometimes never felt quite like I was this vision I had for myself in a way that that art form didn't quite necessarily achieve yet.
Mm.
And in terms of being an advocate, I grew up in a town, Perry, New York, in Wyoming County, where there are more cows than human beings.
Yeah.
And there wasn't theater when I was growing up, or at least I wasn't aware of it. And my parents weren't attuned to it. And, we weren't going to plays necessarily. And I would maybe see like, the things that would come into our auditorium, when we would have like assemblies and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I wasn't really aware of any of it. Um, and
So you never went to a play or music or anything of that like that?
not really that I remember.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I think I was probably brought to like a Nutcracker or something in like Buffalo or Rochester, or had like seen some things, but they just never like stuck in my brain
Right.
that time.
Right.
Um, but what did was comedy and performance, and Saturday Night Live. Whose line is it anyway? I just thought, wow, that like ability to be funny on the spot in the way that they would do on Whose Line, I just thought was like the height of artistry. I thought it was the most incredible skill.
Yeah.
And, my mom's a pretty funny person, very dark humored person. My dad is also a real jokester, rascal type. So I kind of always like grew up knowing that comedy was something that I really liked, and I aspired to be funny and try to make people laugh.
So
So when I went to college,
you
go
never went
ahead.
to Broadway in New York to see any musicals or plays?
Not then,
Thought
no.
you're good at this. Okay.
Yeah, not then. And then I went to college and I saw some plays and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then I had to have an internship my second year of school, which was abroad, and it had to be international. So I was like, yes, this is one of the reasons I came to this
Wow.
program. Like, I'm in, I get to travel. And I got an internship at Shakespeare's Globe Theater,
Where's that at?
London, England.
I can say, isn't it London? Wow.
So it was there that I really got turned on to, the Broadway version, but in London, the West End. And like I saw so many incredible plays, people that were actors, musicians, singers, performers, all in the same show. And I just thought, wow, that's a thing. And then I also started to learn how to do stage combat. And that was like one of those first moments where I had a sword in my hand. I was doing fake punches, reacting to it in this dramatic way, all safely, but like staged to look violent. And there was something about that was one of those moments of intuitive knowing that I talked about earlier. That was like one of the first times I experienced that. And I was like, oh, I know what this is. So like I loved it from those moments. So when I finally went back to college in the US,
Hmm.
I started jumping into everything I could theater wise, and I joined the improv troupe. I auditioned and got in,
Yeah.
and that kind of became this propelling force for me. All that to say, why am I saying all of this to become an arts advocate? Because when I came back to Perry in a more full time way in, I guess it was 2012 is when we started the company. A
And you're
big part of it.
married now?
I am there sometimes, and then I'm down in the city sometimes. I have work
Okay.
here in the city as my day
But
job,
you are
and
in
then
New
I go
York
back and
State,
forth.
though. You're in New York. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And when I came back in 2012, part of the reason was there were other people around my age, young professionals in their 30s, who were doing interesting things and bringing the Main Street back to life. Because when I left to go to college, our Main Street was really dead, and a lot of the industry was leaving, and
That's
there
all over.
just wasn't a lot of yeah, exactly. Not
Yeah.
a lot of options for what I wanted to do, and I wasn't a farmer. My family weren't farmers. That wasn't going to be for me. So I needed to go away to find something. Found theater, the Globe, all of that. And in 2012, I had a injury. I broke both of my feet in a play.
Oh my God.
I know I fell off a tightrope dressed up as a pig wearing tap shoes. And when I hit the ground 15 feet below me, I immediately broke both my feet.
Oh my
And
God.
I know, and stupidly I finished the play. I finished 20 more minutes of the show, and then I couldn't walk for 6 months.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it was a crazy, crazy injury. It was a crazy time. I was mulling, like, should I give this up? Should I do something that's safer and more secure with insurance? All those things. And I remember when I could walk and ride a bike, I went home to Perry and I rode my bike around the lake that I grew up on called Silver Lake, which I had never done before. And I just recall it being so beautiful and seeing this piece of land that was like a sloping green lawn down to the lake with the shimmering sun on it, which is why they call it Silver Lake. And it was a underutilized public space called the Perry Public Beach. I remember swimming there as a kid, but for about 10 years, it was in disrepair. They had a little like cement outbuilding that had become like a squirrel house, like nobody was using it. And I just remembered thinking, wow, this is like a place that I've always thought was incredibly beautiful. Two, this lawn could be the place where maybe we could like put on a show and then bring people to the lake to see this beautiful thing that I also think is beautiful. So I reached out to Pilar McKay, who was someone I noticed who was like a young person, coming back to town, active in the community. And I was like, hey, you're around Perry, like, do you think a theater festival in the summer would work? And unbeknownst to me, Pilar, who I used to write with on the high school newspaper, reached out to the Arts Council, the mayor, the board of town, and
Oh.
they all were like, oh my God, yes, please. And Pilar came back and was like, not only are people interested, but here's this grant that you need to apply for. And I was like, oh no, I guess I have to do it now. Um, so all that to say, like, it was a reason for me to like contribute in a way that I knew I could, because I didn't, I was an artist. That's all I knew how to help with. Um, but also like be around my family who, I hadn't seen. I lived in Arkansas at this theater like for about 8 years. So I was just away most of the time.
Okay.
Um, so it was a way to come back. And then as we were doing it, and it kept happening over the summers, and sometimes these things like take on a life of their own where you're like, I only intended to do this once, and here we are,
So
three, four.
is Shake on the Lake free? Do you charge admission? How did you start? How did you that's this dynamic. I mean, you just said, okay, I'm gonna do this and sit out notices.
We started the thing. We invited everybody we knew, my family, people in town. It was originally a paid admission show. And, we did well enough to keep it going for a few summers. And then in 2015, we applied for a grant to tour the show. And part of that would be uh, getting like a nominal fee to make it free to audiences wherever we took it. And that has kind of continued to be our motto, which is
When you say you toured the show,
Mhm.
you toured in rural towns. Did
Right.
you, how did
So
you select the towns? What was it based on? Or you just felt these were places you knew that they would enjoy it, or
um, we had an incredible grant writer through our local arts council, and she kind of identified some communities of need that, um, you know, would be good partners, people that we would like to partner with. One of them was a historical society, in a local town. Another was this person who ran a like a fiber shop in another town, and she
oh,
was a big champion of the arts. Another was at an arts council in the next county over. Another was at this historical house in the next county over. Um, so just places that we knew, had open public spaces with nothing really going on, but also partners that wanted us there. So we did that. And that was when I started to become this, like, I started to see the importance of doing it, right? Like 2012, I didn't know I was being an arts advocate. 2013, 2014, had no idea that that's what was happening, right?
yeah.
Until someone tells you, my business has seen more business because of the people coming in to see the show. Or you're contributing to the economy in this way and economic development. And I was like, economic development? I don't know what that means. I'm an artist. But you start to learn as it's happening, right? And it's starting to happen around you, and you're seeing some of the changes, and you're seeing people spend the day, in the town, going to the different places, and then they see the show, or they go someplace afterward after the show.
So what type of
Um,
crowds are you attracting? Curious.
they're a mix. They're a mix,
Oh,
right? In Perry, there's a big summering community on Silver Lake. So a lot
oh,
of people that have their like second or third houses that they come to in the summertime. A lot of snowbirds that like come back up there. Um, so we have that sort of like contingent of people, but then we were noticing we were getting people who are going to Letchworth Park, for example, the big state park down there. It's called the Grand Canyon of the East, and it is so beautiful. And
yeah.
people come from all over to visit it. So we would get like some of those folks that were around, or um, just people in Perry who never really spent time on the lake because they didn't realize there was a public place you could go.
So you've kind of
Um,
turned these people into arts lovers, theater lovers.
yeah, and Perry kind of had a background in the arts historically. So
Okay.
Silver Lake was a Chautauqua type community in the 1850s, right? People would come in summer there and engage in arts. And it was like a Methodist retreat movement at that time, in the country's history. And Chautauqua, New York became one and is still one. But
Mm.
there was, the verb was to go in Chautauqua somewhere. And Silver Lake had a community like that as well. So there's a history of it there. Some of the buildings are still there on the Silver Lake Institute. But Perry, it is not the seat of our county in Wyoming County, yet it is where the Arts Council is that represents the whole county. So there was always like a vibe of arts, in Perry, and uh, it was nice to be able to feel like we were contributing to something that historically already was present. So people kind of, I think, were already trained a little bit, but we're training them in Shakespeare and live performance and,
Yes.
you know, eventually puppetry. And how do we do it in a way that feels accessible and not scary? Because Shakespeare can be scary, I know, for a lot of people. So that was always a mission for me was yes, we're coming in. Yes, we're trying this thing. Yes, we are working with the community and the stakeholders to make sure they want us. But then our responsibility as artists is to make sure that the work is understandable and approachable and accessible and in all the ways that means. So, our first year we did the complete works of William Shakespeare Abridged, which is Shakespeare plays, but made really short, almost into sketches, very Monty Python-esque, Saturday Night Live, very improvisational. So I'm feeding on all this background that I came from and kind of using that to put these plays forward. So people are getting a sense that the company is me and my friends, but this vision of theater and art that I like and believe in that I also think is accessible to people. So fast, fun, physical.
The
And how
reason
can we bring people in?
you this, which is great. And it's funny how you just falling into this because it's your passion. Well, the reason why, because when I grew up, I went to puppet shows. Okay, the puppet shows weren't so odd. I went to puppet shows well before I loved the Muppets when they came. And my family, we went to the theater and stuff, and I love musicals and theater. I love music, movies, but it's something about the theater it's something that I feel people have to experience. And the form of art that you're doing, the reason why I do what I do is because the arts is being lost so much, especially classical arts. And that's why I was so fascinated that somebody young like you would do something like this. I think it's awesome. I just
Well,
thought just awesome.
I appreciate that, and I also appreciate you considering that I am young because I think my gray hairs sometimes make me believe that I am not as young as I think. Um, but uh, to your point, touring children's theater shows in rural Arkansas, we're talking Delta,
Yes.
Mississippi border.
Yes.
It's like the sepia tones of movies are what it looks like there, and it's very underserved.
Yes.
And what I remember was going into these schools and
Yeah.
doing these shows, and students would raise their hand afterward and they would say, "What is it like to be in a movie?" And it occurred to me, oh, you've never seen a play before, and you think that what we just did in front of you was a movie because there's no way to know that
Have
there's a
any
difference
reference?
between. Exactly.
Exactly.
So then I knew how important it was to try to like get this work out to places that wouldn't normally have access or ability to get to something in, say, Little Rock, right? That's like 3 hours away from where they were. How are they going to get to the children's theater? We have to bring the children's theater to them. And I
And
think,
as you're saying that, but when I try to constantly tell people, they think of the art world because the art world controls this is art. But I would say 90% of the people in the world have never been to an art gallery, have never been to
mm,
the theater, have never seen art on the walls, have never seen a puppet show. Most people are underserved when it comes to the arts, even in the inner city. I live in Chicago. There's kids that have never been downtown, never
right.
been out of their community. So, what you're doing is how art to me should be experienced. You shouldn't have to go to only certain designated places and only live certain places and only be able to have a certain amount of money. I don't think that's right
I
because
agree.
what you're doing helps expand a child's mind, their creativity, their imagination. I think people need to be more right and left brain because it helps you in business. It helps you be more compassionate about people, more understanding about differences. So that's why I'm doing this. And that's why I love that you went to Arkansas and did that for those kids. You may not know it, but you are really going to make a difference in their lives. Really.
Well, if it's even just one, right? That's what I always felt like, even in where I'm from in Western New York, it is pretty, you know, demographically heterogeneous, right? However,
Yeah.
that doesn't that doesn't stop us from having a very diverse group of artists that we work with, because if even those few people see someone that looks like them doing something that is different from anything they've ever experienced before and opens up the idea of possibility, like
Exactly.
that is like the thing that is so worth it, in so many ways. So
Yes.
uh, that never is lost on me, in doing what we do. So I obviously am just such a believer in all of this work, and why it is important, even when early on that isn't really something I understood necessarily. Is like, what does it mean to be an arts advocate? How am I doing that in my town? Or when someone tells me I am, it's like, I am? Oh, yeah, I guess I am. And it's funny how you kind of are doing those things before you necessarily can name that you're doing that thing.
Also an advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion without saying those words, which can be intimidating to people. When you show
100%.
people, that's what I love about the arts. You can show people difficult concepts or just concepts you want them to be exposed to without saying those words. And it's like a safe place for them to explore that. And that's what you do. And puppets can be a lot of art therapy for people. You can say and do
Yeah,
things, and it's not talking about them directly, but it opens up that little brain that they've got shut down. Oh God, puppets
yeah.
is like magical.
I agree completely.
Oh
Yeah,
God,
puppets,
that's so magical.
yeah, puppets are able to do things that humans can't do, and
Yes.
including tell stories maybe about some difficult subject matter. And I think people can approach it differently because when it is an object, it feels different than a person um, going through that same sort of thing.
Yes. Back in the England, if you were in Europe in the King and Queen days, they used to have those puppets that to do satires about about the king and the empire, and people would laugh. They'd get a chance to vent. I thought that was, just fascinating that they allowed that though. And
A
that was,
hundred percent.
I mean, those were professional, that was just awesome. And the fact that we stopped that, it could be, especially nowadays, that could be a lot of outlet for people.
I agree. Agree. I mean, even the history of marionette puppetry, marionette translated as Little Mary because you
Oh,
weren't allowed to represent figures from the Bible and in the church as a human in human form. So
oh,
in order to like comment on the church and what they were doing, they would make these little figures on strings of Mary and the various other biblical figures to
yeah.
do these plays. Sometimes they were very pro the church, sometimes they weren't.
Yes.
But that's the history of why that is called what it is because of trying to
That's
skirt
it.
around societal rules and still have a voice as an artist.
Yeah. So, how did you find these young puppeteers? I mean, it's not like they're standing on the bus. How do did you go to Indeed and say, I want some puppeteers? How did you do that?
It's such a small world, figuratively and quite literally. And
Wow.
uh, I went to Sarah Lawrence, which, believe it or not, is kind of like a little puppet hub because of some of the faculty that have been there. But between Sarah Lawrence and then UConn, up in Storrs, Connecticut, they have the only place in the country where you can get a major in puppetry.
Wow.
And then,
I know that.
right, and New York City just kind of is a nexus for this kind of work. So, I lived in New York. I still, spend a lot of time here, and you become a part of a community, and you know who the people are, and then your friends who are making work, and the people you went to school with. So that's always kind of been how I have formed my companies or the work that I do is, if I'm starting a Shakespeare company in my tiny little hometown, who do I know? My friends from Arkansas who also did the Shakespeare work with me. So I'm going to bring them up. And people would always ask, why Arkansas? Why are all these actors not from New York or Chicago? And
Yeah,
it's like, well,
I just think it's fascinating.
yeah. It's like these are my friends and these are who I know. And similarly, when I started this puppet festival, who can I bring up that I know their work is going to be interesting and help introduce the community in a way that feels accessible. Dan Hurlin, my teacher, my friend Tom Lee, my teacher, my friend Carlo, who, gave me work in New York when I really needed it. Am I able to help other people who have helped me along the way? I think is kind of how I also think about it.
So is New York kind of a hub of the puppeteer kind of stuff? No place
It
else.
very much is.
Oh wow. I
Yeah.
just think that's fascinating.
Yep. And Chicago's becoming one. The Chicago Puppet Festival is there, and that's been
Yeah,
running for almost 10
yeah.
years now. That's really growing, a little community there with some really great companies. Vermont has kind of a little hub of puppetry. Minneapolis, Minnesota has got a little puppet hub. Those are kind of like the main ones in the United States.
I'm surprised. I've been to one, but I didn't know it was Chicago. They actually had a little group because usually all our artistic creative people move. They go to
Hmm.
other places because Chicago could do a lot better to be more supportive of the arts. We have a lot of arts here, but we don't
Yeah,
exactly like Miami supports, let's say, visual artists. They could do a lot
sure.
better. New York definitely does it, but I'm surprised. I'm really surprised. It's nice that we have something like that.
Yeah, the Chicago International Puppet Festival is a real big deal one and one that people really want to go to. And I'll be performing in for the first time with my own work in January. So I've been there as a performer in other shows, but this is the first time my own work that I've made is going to be there in January. So I'm very excited about that.
Come see you. Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah.
So back to the artists. So you just that's what so the artists that you have for the last 10 years are the all the people you know, or have you mentored other people to become puppet masters or Shakespeare? Shakespeare's a little bit more easier than the puppets, but
I don't know. It depends on who you ask.
well,
um,
I mean, when you go to, I'm not an actor, but when you go to people that want to get into the theater, young people, don't they, can't you take that in school, Shakespearean, acting or,
School, certainly. And I think it's often presented in schools, but in a way that most people don't like because it's so dry and you're just reading it. And, you
oh,
know, I think it kind of depends where you are in the country and the teachers that you have who are presenting it in the ways that, can make it fun and accessible for people. And I guess the same would be for puppetry as well. But,
oh,
I've been lucky to get some teaching jobs in my life. And in those teaching jobs, you work with students, young theater students who are aspiring to something, and then they show some interest in some of the work that you teach them, and it's like, oh, you ever do Shakespeare before? And would you be interested in coming to my little tiny hometown and touring it around? And would you be interested in being in a puppet show? And they come and they do, and it's like one of my great joys to be able to bring former students to this company and this place that's really meaningful to me, and see them also see why it's special and why it matters. Some of these people have moved to my town and have gotten married and became the teacher in my high school teaching theater, which never was a thing before. So like it's very incredible to see how like the threads extend out in the community based on luck a little bit, but also like really pursuing the thing you really love.
so since you have started your companies and you look back, do you really think you made an impact? I think you did in rural New York State. And how do you see that you did that? I mean, it's the people
Yeah.
and young people.
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of measurables that I could point to. Like, one was a desire to work in my high school with the hope that I could introduce, working with professional artists as a way to maybe spark some interest in some young people to then maybe one day be in our company,
Mhm.
like train up the future, you know? As
Or-
someone wisely once told me, my job as an artistic director is to find the person to replace me, right?
Oh, wow.
Um, and I we were able to do that. We have this one incredible artist who, left after working with us in high school, went to pharmacy school, and then realized this is not for me. I want to go back to this thing where I really love, which is theater. So they changed majors and kept coming back in the summers and working with us. And now they are like an integral member of our company, Emily Grierson. And just an incredible artist in their own right, and feel very lucky that that pipeline idea worked. Um, so that's one measurable, right? Another I would say is that public beach that I was talking about. It was an underutilized public space. There were no bathrooms. We had to ask the neighbors for power to like plug in our sound system.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean,
Yeah.
it was pretty dilapidated, right? And we had to bring in, porta potties and things like that. And in 2019, they broke ground and they renovated the whole thing to the tune of $1 million. And now there's this like incredible beach area with docks and swimming access and kayaks and bathrooms that are really lovely and a shelter, and they've graded it all, so it's like really lovely. Like they really invested in this community asset that I think they forgot they had until we were there and we showed them that this could be a community asset by bringing people to it.
Oh, wow.
So there are like those sorts of things that are really useful. Or I was approached with an opportunity to take over a space on our main street. It was an abandoned storefront. There wasn't anything in it, and this grant opportunity came up to take it over and turn it into a theater. So I, at that time, wasn't necessarily interested in taking over like a space, but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh, this could be the place where we could have a little shop and rehearsals and do residencies and bring artists up to like develop a new play that then could become something we put up somewhere, and then the puppet festival happened.
So when did you
So
take over this building?
2017,
Oh, wow. That's smart. That was a good move.
it ended up being such a lucky opportunity, and I'm glad we seized it to try it, and that has spawned all these other things. So again, these measurables of um, people continuing to come back. A lot of the artists like working with us and they keep coming back, and you see a lot of the same faces over 13 years. And I think that's a measurable, is that our quality is good and we make it a priority to pay artists a more than a living wage
Oh,
to
wow.
be there.
Good.
And
That's
and that's the
good
thing that we've always tried. We've
that you're
always
thriving.
tried to make sure that people are paid to do it and paid well to do it. So um those are some of the measurables that I would say, like, show that there's value and people think it's working, and that feels really good. And that other communities come to us sometimes and are like, we saw your show in this place and we loved it. Could you bring it to our town? And it's like, sure, here's what it would take and let us know. Um, and we work with communities. We have a grant writer that's really great at helping them find ways that they can then um, find some funding, so then we can come and make it free to everybody. That's always the goal. So we've adopted sliding scales as well. So any of the things that we do have paid admissions. It's pay what you can admission. So if it's $1, if it's no dollars, you can still come in and see the work, and that always feels important to us as well.
So you just went to Arkansas this year, right?
This time returning back to perform our work there. Yeah,
This was the first time you went to Arkansas, right?
yeah.
So are you gonna extend to start going there every year?
We are trying to make that possible. We're in talks right now to try to do some of those same venues and work with some of the same partners. So we're hoping that that will all happen. Some of it's based on grants, some of it is based on timing and, you
Yeah.
know, artists that are available to make it work, directors and things like that. But that's the hope. We are working on it and hoping to make it work.
So do you do your performances all in the summer and then you all practice in the winter? Is that how it goes, or do you do it all year round?
It's a little bit more seasonal, so it's mostly in the summer. Uh, we do a lot of development and planning throughout the winter. We also do like smaller things in our community at our theater. So we'll do or we have done monthly improv shows for a long while. We did a winter show for a long time and haven't been able to really bring that one back since the pandemic, but we're trying to figure out ways to do that, and then also doing some more things in our schools. Um, we've just started a First Fridays series at our theater and a Shakespeare reading club, so that's been really new and fun for us. So we're always kind of experimenting to kind of see, is there demand and will people come?
So what's next for you?
It's a really good question.
Not
Um,
that there has to be a next, but
yeah, I had always envisioned, and this is like a 30, 40-year vision, that we could get a building and create a performing arts
company,
complex
complex.
nexus, in Perry that would kind of echo what was created, 150 years ago during the days of the Chautauqua
It looks like
band.
you're on that way. You're doing it. You're doing it in stages. You're in the building now. It looks like you're headed towards that.
Yeah, growth is slow, right? um, but that's okay because I think for us, the danger could be trying to grow too quickly.
Oh,
And I think we've done it in ways that are working for us and for the community, frankly.
and they're sustainable.
And that's the important part, right? Is we have been lucky to always, remain in the black. And
Oh, good.
uh,
That is really. Are you a non-for-profit?
we became one in 2016.
Okay. I just
Yeah.
got a non-for-profit. Decided to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really helpful. Really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. You are definitely the poster child of advocacy for me. That's what I'm thinking. Definitely something that's definitely needed in the arts. And it's also educational. That's why I wanted to do the video separate from the two magazines, because people need to understand. When I talk to Linda Frank, we definitely understand.
Yeah.
People don't understand that the arts, and this is also culture to me, is very underserved in the world,
Sure.
in the United States. They look at Chicago, New York, all the major cities, and because we have TV, everybody knows about the arts. And what they now show on TV and modern music and the arts, it's only a certain small segment. It's not the broad segment that's really available, and people don't have access to that.
Right. Right.
And art is not in the schools, so I'm so glad that a lot of schools, that's the first thing they cut. They cut the arts.
Always. Right.
And they do
Right.
get it. It's like a little crayon drawing class. It's not really the arts. Yeah, it's not. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're doing this as needed. And I can see you definitely growing to that level, because I'm it needs to come back. And they put music, the music industry, thank God, takes care of itself. They
Yeah.
do make sure there's programs. But when it comes to visual arts and other arts, it's not as organized, and it's kind of hot potch. And it does need to be more and more people pushing for this.
Hmm.
So you'll definitely have a lot of work for as long as you want it, I'm sure.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And, it's interesting again how like you just jump into the thing sometimes and it pushes you along until you're like, oh, this is what it is. And case in point is my current, like my full-time job is I work at the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University. So what I do is I travel all over to different uh, scientific institutions, universities, any place where there are STEM people or just experts in something that is like deeply technical. And we put them through these professional development communications workshops that are all based in theater and improv in the
Oh,
hopes to help them understand who their audiences are and how to communicate to them in ways that it matters to them, and being just a little bit more flexible and strategic when you're trying to get your message to land with different audiences. So I never thought that improv would take me here, but it's been
Wow,
really cool to be able to like go to places like NASA and teach these amazing, amazing, brilliant people and hopefully offer them something that they could find of use in this world that I just love and think is so important.
funny that you would do that, but my background's in biology and science,
Ah,
not in
yeah,
arts. I have a
yeah,
first background, but I think that's needy because science is so advanced now, much, much, much more advanced than the average person. And it's like a disconnection, and they need to do exactly what you're saying because people are not listening to them and they don't believe them. And they need to draw people back in, it's sexy and attractive and people are
right.
liking to listen to them because right now they're like, yeah, right. And they still don't believe in climate change. And look what happened in Florida. They still are resisting, but it's the way they're talking to the people that people are like, so that's really a good. Did you come up with that idea?
No, I did not. The
Yeah.
actor Alan Alda did.
Oh, I see why. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he's
smart.
a real amazing, amazing guy. So I'm
Yes.
happy to be a part of his center and work in this way.
Well, Josh, thank you very, very much for allowing me to do the two magazines on your companies and to interview you because this is a blessing. It really is. It's,
Well, I am appreciative that you found us and are interested in shouting us out. It's really lovely. It helps out a small theater company like ours,
okay.
certainly. And, you know, I appreciate you also, you know, giving me a lot of the credit, but truly, like, I couldn't do any of this without my co-founder, Pilar McKay,
Oh,
who,
yes.
really helped push all of these things along with me. My collaborator, Chad Bradford, who is just this incredible artist from Arkansas, who's now running the creative direction of what was the Children's Theater. He is now the person in charge down there.
I saw
So,
that all of them, they are so talented too.
yeah, so we're really lucky. We have a great team, Emily Grierson, Linda Frank.
Yeah.
It's just we're
Linda's
lucky and we
one
have
to
a
refer
community
me
of
to.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And a great community of people that still want us around. So, it's nice to be in this. It's nice to do something where you're not alone when you're doing it.
Yeah.